Uh, Welcome everyone. Let's start. Uh, we are supposed to have two speakers today, but one speaker, Frieda Afary, has not joined. So we begin with Nasrin Parvaz. Hope Frieda joins us later on. First of all, let me briefly explain the purpose of this webinar, which perhaps doesn't need a big explanation. We yet another time had a huge mass movement, a rebellion in Iran. It started on 28th of December and it went on till mid of January. Again, the regime there brutally massacred people to crush this wave of protest. And perhaps this was the biggest protest wave we have seen in Iran. Nasreen will be better placed to comment on this. But definitely this was one of the biggest movements we have seen in Iran and in the region actually. We have been talking about Arab Spring, and one may argue that the Arab Spring actually started in Iran, where before the Arab Spring we had huge mass movement against the rigged elections when Ahmadinejad was elected second time. About 3 years ago, we had this Zan Zindagi Azadi women life freedom movement, again a huge movement which attracted global attention. One purpose of this webinar is to amplify the Iranian voices. We want to hear our Iranian friends and comrades. But also, the purpose of this webinar, no matter how small gesture it is, to build a support for this Iranian movement, which we at Struggle think is very important for the whole region. Likewise, uh, it was a bit unfortunate that sections of the left they refused to support the Iranian protest movement. Many would call it even Iranian revolution or a sort of ongoing revolution. What we call Campism, people started supporting the regime because it is anti-imperial, it is anti-American. This is also very important debate. In last about 3 to 4 years, the global left was divided yet again. Last time it was on the question of Ukraine, when in the name of so-called campism, we saw how some sections of the left did not support the Ukrainian resistance movement. So there are a number of questions that we need to discuss and we need to analyze. Also, we need to know how this movement gonna unfold in the coming years. So we luckily have Nasreen Parvaz available today to speak to us. Nasreen is, author of the award-winning One Woman Struggle in Iran, a prison memoir. Nasreen has a long struggle herself. Soon after the revolution, she got active in the movement for human rights and civil rights in Iran. She spent 8 horrible years in Iranian prisons and torture cells, which she has documented in her memoir. Then she escaped in 1993 to London, where she presently lives. So thank you very much, Nasreen. Over to you. I would request you to finish your intervention in roughly 15 minutes. Then we will have hopefully Frieda Afray joining us. If she doesn't join, then I will ask you a few questions. We will open the house to the audience for Q&A session, and then in the end you can sum it up. So thank you very much, and over to you, Nasreen.
Thank you for inviting me. If you have my voice, isn't it? Every few years, uprising erupt across London, and each wave of resistance is deeper and more widespread than the one before. The one in 2022 triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini in moral custody. The recent uprising was triggered by economic collapse and extreme poverty. Telephone communications and the internet have been cut for two reasons. Firstly, so that images of the massacre do not come out of the country, and secondly, so that people can't get in touch with each other and organize their movements. It is the first time that the regime has cut the phone lines, nationally. This shows how important it is for people to be connected. I would like to emphasize on few points. The first one is that Western governments are as afraid of people uprising in Iran as much as the regime is. Any change brought about through the people of Iran will inspire others in the region to also stand up for their rights against the Western-backed regimes in their countries too. So all these threats from America and Israel are intended to dampen the revolutionary spirits of the people as much as they are designed to facilitate regime change. In this round of uprising in Iran, the regime stated that foreign agents have killed people. If this is the case, then why has the regime cut off the internet? They would surely let people film these supposed citizen on citizen killings so the world sees who is killing who. Everyone knows that since taking power, the regime has executed activists by accusing them of being America and Israel agents. I was condemned to execution for the same reason, and I lost so many friends to execution for the same reason. Netanyahu has said Israeli agents are on the ground with protesters in Iran. Then on January 7th, his puppet Pahlavi called for a rally on 8th and 9th January. People would have come out these days anyway, but Pahlavi's call was to say people are coming out for him, which of course wasn't true. Pahlavi's call gave an excuse to the regime to shut down the internet and phone calls in Iran on 8th of January. Netanyahu and Pahlavi condemned millions of people in the streets to execution with their announcements, as if all those people who poured to the street for food and freedom were Israeli collaborators. And then Trump shot the last round of bullets into the people's heads. He asked people to stay in the street and continue with their demonstrations. He gave false hope to those who had not come out yet, hope that he is going to support them by attacking the regime's military bases. It has been many years that the West has supported monarchists by providing two television channels for them that are trying to brainwash Iranians. Persian language media around, which are in London or America, and receive funding from specific foreign governments, promotes Pahlavi as an alternative leader. Pahlavi is a product of the media in a time when people are trying to escape from the regime's media in Iran and only have this alternative media to engage with. Despite this, Pahlavi couldn't establish any organization in his favor after attempting to do so many times. Aside from this, monarchies show an attitude of fascism towards anyone who doesn't agree with them, and this attitude has made them unpopular. Pahlavi praised the bombs landing in Iran that killed innocent civilians. June last year. He has no interest in the well-being of innocent Iranians, just like the Islamic regime. Pahlavi has openly said that he wants to make a new regime using part of the current one. He has invited the Islamic Guards that have suppressed people to join him. So oppression will continue under the monarchy, and it will be appointed by Western governments. People are struggling for food and freedom, not for another repressive regime. Monarchies are supporting Farage. Who can support Trump and Farage? Someone like them, or someone who is so alienated that doesn't know what Trump or Farage think about them? Now they are chanting death to mullahs, mujahideen, and leftists. So they too have issued my death sentence because I'm a socialist. Imagine after all those executions by the Islamic regime, they too want to use the news to silence people. This is all while the Iranian socialists are asking for the ban of execution. When monarchies are they have demonstrations, they use the Israeli flag and the monarchy's flag together. They beat up anyone who chants slogans different to theirs. Monarchies are changing clips of demonstrations using AI and changing slogans in support of the Pahlavi. Another point, apart from these, another point I would like to make is that the savagery of the suppression of the recent uprising reminds me of two other suppressions during the 1980s that each took place after separate invasion. Iraq attacked Iran in 1980, which caused a war that lasted 8 years. When the war started, my generation was in the streets demanding the same rights that people are demanding now. The Iraq invasion gave the regime an excuse to trap my generation at home or arrest them and kill them. The other similar suppression took place in 1988 when the regime massacred 1,000 prisoners across the country. I was in prison at the time, and I witnessed this massacre firsthand. The massacre of prisoners in 1988 took place when the Mujahideen attacked Iran from Iraq. The Mujahideen attack was suppressed quickly and was then used as an excuse to kill thousands of prisoners. Now this round of uprising has taken place while America is threatening to attack Iran. And both America and Israel have said that they have agents among the protesters. I don't know whether Israeli or American agents are on the ground in Iran, but it is important that why they claim such a thing. Don't they know that working with Israel and America is the worst crime in Iran? Of course, they knew that. And when governments have spies in other countries, do they say it like that? Don't they feel ashamed of being criticized by their own people? It seems they all wanted to defeat the people uprising, not only the regime, but Israel and America were very worried that people would overthrow the regime. In such a case, how can they control Iran after the Islamic regime? So they need to do a regime change before the next uprising. But why does the West need to pretend millions of people in Iran started an uprising through Western channels? Is it only to ease the regime, to have an excuse to kill the protesters? Or is it to keep its citizens silent? So the Europeans say nothing to killing people in Iran because the movement is Israeli or American? Or is it both of these reasons? In fact, some people in Western countries say that these movements are incited by America. That's why they don't support the people. At the same time, they don't tell their governments to keep their hands off Iran. The interesting thing is that the Europeans who look away from our struggle and all the regime changes their governments had done on top of making us poor, these intellectuals think it's only them that see the truth, that we are following a Western plan to overthrow an anti-imperialist regime. Of course, they think they surely know better than us who are fighting against these regimes on the ground because they are white and mostly men. Their privilege makes them think they know better than us. I hope that one day they open their eyes and see how they are accomplices to evil with their governments and not only didn't support our cause, but humiliated us for knowing what they don't know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nasrin. We have Frieda also joining us.
Good.
Frieda, thank you very much.
I'm
There
so
was
sorry.
this confusion of time, I think.
Yes, it's
Frieda
now
thought the time was a bit late as usual.
yes,
Anyway,
our
thanks a
time
lot.
here is 5:53 a.m. So, and I thought it was 7:30 a.m. our time. So I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's really kind of you. You accepted my call, and I have already introduced you to the audience briefly, but let me introduce you yet again. Frieda Afray is based in the USA, an Iranian American feminist librarian. She has background in philosophy. She has written a book titled Socialist Feminism, A New Approach. It was published by Pluto Press in 2022. She also produces Iranian progressives in translations. Also a website called socialistfeminism.org. Frida, thank you very much at this odd hour for you. Um, it's over to you. You have roughly 15 minutes to, state your position for your intervention on Iran. We want to know your position on Iran, how the things are unfolding there, and then we will have few questions to you. Both I will ask you a few questions, and then audience may ask you a few questions. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. And again, I'm sorry that I didn't hear Nasrin's presentation because I would have liked to um, direct my comments at her as well and not repeat what she has said. So apologies if there are any repetitions. Um, so, I mean, of course, we know that the latest wave of protests started on December 28th. It started the bazaar, strike over the issue of economic collapse in Iran. And but then it expanded into street protests, university students. It expanded to all 31 provinces of Iran, all age groups, both women and men, and I'm sure non-binary people, and that it became apparently, according to some estimates, the number of participants even exceeded the Green Movement in 2009, which was millions. So um, uh, we also know that according to some of the latest estimates, even from the United Nations, there might be the regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, might have killed up to 20,000 people. We do know that it's at the very least, it's 4,500 based on the Iranian Human Rights Association based in the U.S. At least 4,500, but even possibly up to 20,000. We know that the police and the army were extremely brutal, that they aimed for eyes. And there were so many reports of doctors actually removing the eyes from the eye socket, and they attacked hospitals. From what I've heard also, because as I'm sure Nasrin mentioned, because of the internet shutdown, it's been very hard for us to get real accurate information from inside Iran, from our contacts and friends, or even some of the media sources have had a very difficult time getting a lot of accurate information. But we're still getting some videos and audio reports. So the level of brutality has been incredible. We also know that in comparison to the 2022 Women Life Freedom Movement, which had very democratic slogans, of course, the slogan "Woman Life Freedom" itself, and it started over the murder of Mahsa Amini because of her refusal or her not abiding by the strict hijab laws. So in comparison to the 2022 Women Life Freedom Movement, which had pro of women's rights content and democratic content, we know that this set of protests had more pro-monarchy slogans. But it does not mean by any means that the majority of the people who participated in these protests were monarchists. But we do know, and we need to be honest about it, that apparently, monarchists have been able to gain some more influence despite all the horrible things that they've said. For instance, in the June 2025 war between U.S., Israel, and Iran, we do know that the Western intervention that the monarchists backed actually ended up bombing the Evin prison, where some of the most important political prisoners of Iran are imprisoned. And so Israel actually bombed the Evin prison. So that itself showed that U.S. and Israeli intervention is not a progressive thing. It's not aimed at saving progressive forces in Iran. And so it was my impression that experience and all the horrors of that war would lead some people who thought that Western intervention and return of monarchy to save them to think otherwise. But apparently, no, the monarchists still had quite a bit of influence. But again, that does not mean that we should dismiss these protests, does not mean that the majority of the people who protested were pro-monarchy. So there have been two different types of analyses among Iranians. One are those who talk about the severity of the brutality and the number of people killed, and the fact that there have been, progressives involved as well in these protests, progressives killed as well, including a lot of university students, including students from some of the most elite universities like Tehran University and Sharif University. And I have myself in my work in Iranian Progressives in Translation, my latest article, I cited that there were statements from progressives such as women and the Writers Association, political prisoners, and various intellectuals who do not support the monarchy or Western or any type of foreign intervention. So there have been those analyses that emphasize those aspects, and I'm very happy about that. And at the same time, there are also analyses that are, not opposed to those, but complementary that, ask why it is that we have faced this returning appeal of the monarchy among certain sectors of the Iranian population, and don't really blame the Iranian people for it, but argue that there have been limitations within Iranian progressives themselves that allowed for gaps, that allowed for appeal of certain very retrogressive views and the claim of certain retrogressive views to save the Iranian population. So, for instance, in my latest article in my blog, Iranian Progressives in Translation and in New Politics, I cited the work of Mohammad Reza Nikfar, who's an Iranian philosopher and a former editor of the website Zamaneh, who has always been supportive of protests against the Iranian regime, and has always backed progressive forces. But he, in one of his most recent pieces, he had really urged people to be more thoughtful about their protests and recognize that without, developing an affirmative content about a democratic future, the protests will not succeed. So he had made some very helpful suggestions that I would like to read. One moment, please. I'd like to bring that up and read that.
Excuse.
So he said in one of his latest articles that I briefly summarized and quoted, he said, in the words of Mohammad Reza Nikfar, Iranian philosopher and former editor of Zamaneh Media, Iran is facing a dangerous situation in which the current form of tyranny might be replaced by a new form of tyranny. He calls on people not to succumb to hatred and thoughtlessness. It is essential to have an affirmative vision that is opposed both to the Islamic Republic and monarchy and any military intervention or any form of tyranny. Nikfar thus proposes an affirmative program with minimum demands based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The minimum demands which he proposes include freedom of speech, press, and assembly, freedom for political prisoners, an end to the death penalty, abolishing the mandatory hijab laws, abolishing discrimination against women and ethnic or religious minorities, gender equality, separating religion and state, removing the military's ties to the economy, creating anti-poverty programs, and democratizing the educational system. Also calls for taking a clear stand against Iran's nuclear program and its military interventions regionally and globally. So I think this is the type of intervention. I'm sorry, there's background noise. Can you?
Sorry, Sultan sir, please mute kar le. Thomas, kindly mute everyone. Thomas, could you kindly mute everyone? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. So I think this is the type of intervention that I side with. In other words, someone who's who is a defender of the protests, who has been a defender of the uprisings or mass protests against the Iranian regime for many years, and who's deeply rooted in the movement, but also has a critical perspective and wants to offer democratic ideas. And I think that, if I may say one more thing before I stop, personally, my experience with the Iranian progressives has been that while they certainly oppose the Islamic Republic and have been doing their best to support the protests inside Iran by offering news and analyses, or even sending material aid to the extent possible. We still really lack on the question of, number one, international solidarity with places in the world where the Iranian regime has been helping authoritarian regimes kill their own mass struggles. For instance, Syria, when between 2011 and 2024, the Iranian government was one of the, Iran and Russia were the two main backers of the Assad regime, which brutally suppressed the Syrian uprising, and for many years following that, suppressed any continuation of that effort. And then more recently, Iran has been selling drones and missiles to Russia to bomb Ukrainian infrastructure and the Ukrainian struggle for self-determination against Russian imperialist invasion. So, those are two really important places where I did not see a real sustained effort on the part of Iranian progressives to express solidarity with those struggles. I have done my best to do that, but again, we need much more work on that. And then on the question of Iran's nuclear program, I don't think we've really done enough to express openly and publicly, say everywhere, that Iranian progressives are opposed to Iran's nuclear program and nuclear ambitions, and in general to the Iranian government's military interventions in the region. And then I think on the question of national minorities inside Iran, of course, progressives have supported the Kurdish struggle. Women Life Freedom movement started with the murder of a Kurdish woman. Mahsa Amini was Kurdish, and the protests actually started in Kurdistan. And we've had some really important struggles among Iran, the Kurdish national minority, the Baluch, the Arab national minority. So the question, the national question, the issue of how to have a democratic Iran that would allow for some type of autonomy, or at least recognition of the cultural and environmental and social rights of national minorities is really key. And I don't think that the Iranian progressives have ever in a sustained and consistent way try to offer a solution that would really attract masses of people to say, okay, this is something around which we can all come together and recognize that our rights are respected, and that we will not be oppressed again by a new government. So I would say that if the progressives work on those areas, luckily the progressives have been much better on the question of opposition to patriarchy. And of course, with the Women Life Freedom movement, it was clear that this is the key issue for Iran, because the regime is so misogynistic, and yet as a result, we've had for many years women speaking up, developing themselves in ways that are really amazing. And then finally, I think that, some people say, well, we have a lack of leadership inside Iran. No, we have some really important people inside Iran who could be leaders of a democratic future, more democratic society. Of course, we have Nasrin today, who's an Iranian feminist human rights attorney, who's a great intellectual, who's a great speaker, who was in prison for many years. Her husband is currently in prison. Her husband is also a writer. Her husband is in prison. And we have others. So, I mean, the Iranian Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narges Mohammadi is definitely wants to be recognized as a leader. There are others. We have writers, we have teachers, we have labor activists. We don't have a shortage of qualified, capable, and principled people inside Iran who could be leaders. And it's a question of recognizing that, not thinking that the leader has to be created from abroad or brought about by Western intervention or any kind of foreign military intervention. And one last thing is that when I speak of foreign intervention, I think it's important to say that we do have a foreign intervention in Iran also in the form of Russian intervention and Chinese intervention, economic, social, political. And so when we speak of opposition to foreign intervention, it's not only the US and Israel, but it's also Russia and China. So these are some of my thoughts for now, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frieda. Thank you, both of you, for very insightful interventions. I would request the audience to pose their questions either through the comment section. They can send us written questions, or they can raise hand, and Thomas, who is helping us with this Zoom meeting and controlling it, he will let you speak. There is already a raised hand, but yeah, quite a few raised hands. Thomas, you will deal with it. First, I wanted to actually pose a question, one to Nasrin and other to Nasrin and one to Frieda. Then we can move on. Frieda, my question to you is, how was the position of the Iranian left? I know it's very small. Largely, the left groups are in exile. But at least in Pakistan, Tudeh Party's statement was circulated a lot in favor of the protests. Likewise, there is a section of the trade unions that we can call independent trade unions. They were also supporting the trade unions. So, in your case, I want to know the position of the Iranian left inside the country and internationally that can be qualified as organized left. And to Nasreen, I want to know how much was this a continuation of the previous movements, especially Zan Zindagi Azadi movement. First, maybe Nasreen can go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. In the Women Life Freedom movement, thousands of people were killed, tortured, lost their eyes, and were poisoned, and more. I mean, the torture was, they used many ways of torturing people. But after this, power shifted. Women gained with their lives some small personal freedom, such as what to wear. In the 2022 uprising, more than 500 people, mostly young women, were blinded with French-made bullets. In the recent uprising, too, this kind of warfare was used against civilians, and this time thousands of people were blinded. I wonder where the bullets were bought, France again, or were they left over from the last shipment to Iran? For how many more uprising do the regime have bullets to kill and blind people with? Does it matter? No. The only matter is that capitalism survives by making, selling, and using these weapons alongside empty words of sympathy with those who die by these weapons. The suppression of women's life freedom was extreme, but it didn't stop people from standing up again. The suppression of women's life freedom movement took time. It took a year or more until people were pushed back into their houses again. But this time the regime realized that it can't let the protest continue for long. That's why it was perhaps the most brutal suppression during last 47 years. I heard from different people that it was a war, and they saw things that they never could imagine, and people are shocked. So we can talk about it more as we go. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasrin. Frieda, over to you.
So first I want to say that because of the internet shutdown, it's still very difficult to get a lot of information from Iran. And that also because of the degree of the suppression, it's harder for them inside to issue statements. But basically, my understanding is based on statements that I've read, mostly issued before the suppression got to be severely brutal, which was around January 7, January 8. Mostly before that, they were statements from political prisoners, from women's organizations, from writers, organizations, intellectuals, saying that they were opposed both to foreign military intervention and to the monarchy, and opposed to the Islamic Republic. So that was very clear in the statements by forces from the left. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I mean, mine generally was about the left, how the left reacted, did they support both inside the country and in the diaspora?
So I would say the left has been supportive of the protests and emphasizing that the fact that there have been more monarchist slogans does not mean that these protests should be dismissed. I think most of us on the left have been clear on that. And I think the Zamane media has been really the best on that, which is based in Holland, but it's very deeply rooted inside Iran. So they have been clear on supporting the protests, but in a critical way that distinguishing themselves from those parts of the protests that were pro-monarchy or pro-Western or foreign military intervention. But at the same time, I've seen leftists express critical views, saying, and again, Nikfa is one of them, and others have basically expressed the view that, why did this happen? Why is it that between the 2022 Women Life Freedom Movement, which had such clear and well articulated democratic content in defense of women's rights and the rights of minorities, oppressed minorities, why is it that 3 years later, there's so many more pro-monarchy and pro-Western intervention slogans? And what have we not done that allowed for this, or what have been the shortcomings that allowed for this? And again, why did we underestimate the impact of the propaganda from social media, the public being bombarded by this propaganda about the monarchy coming back to save you, or foreign intervention coming to save you? Why did we not address that in a more systematic way? And why did we underestimate it? So that's what I've seen. But again, I have not seen people on the left dismissing these protests or saying, oh no, they were all monarchists. Or no, it's been support for the uprising, and recognizing that there's so many that progressives have also been involved in these protests.
There is a hand raised by Kasser Javed. Kasser, over to you, and Thomas will let you in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Farooq, comrade, for this session. It was very necessary, and I think it was necessary even to do it before. But anyways, thank you. And I have two questions, if it is okay if I ask both of them.
Please go ahead, but be very brief.
Okay. Okay, I'll try as much brief as possible. So my first question is the question about the sanctions, which is very important, and about the sanctions. If I'm audible, yeah. So the question is about the sanctions. So so I'm imagining a scenario, like I really want to understand this, that if there was a capitalist country in the socialist world, and who is, like, of course, we understand that capitalists are brutal. And if we are doing trade and all the things with the people in the country, who is the capitalist country in an imaginary socialist world, so what would be a response of a socialist country if the country is, oppressing its people? Like, we will put the sanctions on the country, or how we will react to that if the country was a capitalist country in a socialist world? So what was our reaction? So this is my first question. If I put it clearly, I'm sorry for my not good English and bad explanation to it. And the second question I have is that, like most of the left, like Farooq have told about in the Pakistan as well, they are, of course, talking about the geopolitical scenarios in which they are, talking about the Khamenei. And my question is that if Khamenei collapse, like we have seen an uprising in Bangladesh recently, in Nepal and many other countries, but they have come to the West, like they have fallen into the hands of the West, like again in the capitalists, because there was no, there wasn't any counter force like the left who can, take the power. And as we know that, okay, if the people are going to fight against the Khamenei collapse, and then again, it is either way going to fall in the hands of West. So how do you, create this scenario? That how do you think that it is the, win for the people? And slightly linked to this question, the geopolitical link, that if the Khamenei is going to fall and there is no support for the Hamas, who is fighting against Israel, or Hezbollah and other region who are fighting against the imperialists,
Okay. Kasser, we got your question.
Thank you.
Kasser sir, we got your question. Okay. So I would.
Oh, Farooq, you are muted. I can't hear you.
Okay. I would suggest first Nasrin, if she wants to answer, and then Frieda. There are two questions.
Would you kindly restate, because I could not hear the speaker well? Thank you.
Okay. The first question is, what if there were a socialist world but a capitalist country oppressing its people? Would the socialists be placing sanctions on such a country? The second is, what if Khamenei goes and another, brutal pro-West regime replaces it? What should we do? So these are two questions. Maybe we can go first with Nasrin and then Frieda. Nasrin, you want to respond?
Sure. With if Khamenei goes, dies or whatever, the thing is, the system is run by Islamic Guard. They have all the economy is in their hands, and they are running people to poverty. And the sanction is, of course, if it was the world was socialist, they wouldn't do such a thing. But the sanction didn't hurt the regime; it hurt the people. I mean, the regime have had all the money, from selling oil or whatever. And they have all these money here in the West. And if they need it for example, going to a hospital, they came here. It's only for people that couldn't afford and couldn't find, for example, medicine. So, yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Frieda?
Um, one moment. So, as far as sanctions are concerned, I think Nasrin is right. It turns out that the sanctions have basically mostly helped the regime because they allowed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to have even more monopolized control over bringing in goods and doing any kind of trade. But at the same time, I think that there is still possible to have targeted sanctions that are aimed at specific individuals that are running the Islamic Republic, and also aimed at, for instance, Iran's production of drones and missiles, which, you know, Iran has become a big producer of drones and missiles, which it sells to Russia for bombing Ukraine. So I think it is still possible to sanction those things, or at least try to. And as far as the second part of the question is concerned, and by the way, concerning sanctions, I mean, the European Union is now saying that they're going to declare the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps a terrorist organization. It is a terrorist organization, but for all these years they've been working with it. So where have they been? On the question of what will happen if a pro-West regime takes over? Okay, I think that the more likely scenario, as far as what I see, is that there might be something like the Venezuela scenario, in which what we saw in Venezuela was that Maduro was abducted, and Maduro was a dictator and an illegitimate president, but nevertheless, he was abducted. And I don't support U.S. military intervention in Venezuela either. But what they did in the case of Venezuela was that they abducted Maduro, but they kept the Maduro regime intact. And so we're now seeing this collaboration between the Trump administration and the Maduro regime. And I can see that happening in Iran, between some sectors of the IRGC and the Trump administration. That maybe they would get rid of some of the leading figures of the Islamic Republic. Maybe they would get rid of Khamenei, or he'll die. But the regime will stay intact, and maybe it would lose its religious fundamentalist character, or at least exterior, but the regime would stay intact in the sense that the IRGC, which is also in control of the bulk of the capital of Iran, it's a military entity that also controls the bulk of the capital in Iran. I could see that staying in power and having some type of collusion with the Trump administration, and I think that would be horrible too. I mean, it would lead to even further repression. So I think that what progressive forces do really matters, and the kind of progressive alliances that we try to forge with people in countries that the Iranian Islamic Republic has actively oppressed, countries where it has intervened either directly or indirectly. That is really, really key. And also with progressive forces inside Iran and the national minorities in Iran. I think that is really, really key for progressive forces.
Thank you, Frieda. I would also suggest Kasser and other people to read an article by Ilham Homifer in Iran draft. We translated it to Urdu today. I'm writing in the comment section. This really also is a very good debate on the question of sanctions and all what Kasser was asking. Before I hand over to Sushman for his question, I also want to suggest one thing. We have comrades attending this webinar from Turkey, India, Philippines, Canada, many different countries. Will also be good, very briefly, to know how the left in your country has reacted to these protests. So next, it will be Sushman from India. He's based in Kolkata. Thomas, kindly let Sushman in.
I've already done that. You can
Yeah.
speak.
Thanks, Farooq, and I thank both. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I thank both the speakers. My question is slightly different. On the 12th of January, Trump made an appeal, made a statement saying that Iranian patriots keep protesting, take over your institutions, help is on its way. And then, many things happen. I'm not getting into that. But my question is, Trump's statement, more than being a statement against the Iranian regime, what I feel is aimed at strengthening the foothold of the regime, which is illegitimate for many reasons that we know, which is unpopular, immensely unpopular. That's very palpable. So it's trying to get some, foothold for the regime, some popular sentiment for the regime, as a sort of an anti-imperialist icon in the whole, in the region. The reason why I say this is for Trump and for American interest, it perfectly suits if there is because Iran, if you have Iran, a stronger Iran, a theocratic Iran, you can have Israel on the other side. If you can have Israel, you can have theocratic Iran, and also the traditional Shia-Sunni divide in the West Asia. So for Trump, this sort of statement perfectly served the purpose of creating a permanent culture of hostility, animosity, antagonism in the region, and also a culture of fear. So what do you think about that? It's more about his posture rather than any real intention of going against the theocratic regime of Iran. Thank you.
So I think this time maybe I can ask Frieda to go first and then Nasrin. Frieda?
Well, I believe that what Trump said, well, first he said, we're ready to go. What was the expression? Locked and ready. I can't remember the exact expression.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then a few days later, when they asked him to, some of the people in his administration asked him to meet with Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former king, the former dictator, to basically recognize him and give him legitimacy, more legitimate, or give him some legitimacy in the eyes of the West. Trump said, no, it's too soon. Let's see who comes up on top. That's what he said. Let's see who comes up on top. And to me, that was a very clear expression that, he wants to see who wins. And he had no intention of helping the Iranian protesters. We know that that is not his intention. So he wanted to see who would win, and then decide who he wants to make a deal with. So that's all I have to say about that question.
Nasrin?
I think I answered this question at the beginning, that I said America, Israel, they know that if they support the movement in Iran, the regime finds an excuse to kill the protesters, and they gave this excuse to the regime, and the regime attended street executions this time, just with the excuse that it's a movement of America and Israel supporting. Yeah, it was yeah, it was good for the regime, yeah, to have an excuse.
Okay, and I think it was Mazhan who wanted to ask a question. Mazhan?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask a question about the nature of power in itself because I see quite a pattern in our discussions. There are some events that are happening daily, and we speak about those events, what happened, when, and why. I want to understand the very nature of power, like the way the state works from these events. I want to understand, like, is it possible for any state to not be imperialistic if it has the resources and the power? So because when we criticize the state of Iran or on certain points that it is like against working the minority, it is working against the women. I think in the same way we criticize Pakistan, also the same kind of criticism we also see in United States. So the question is like, is it possible for the state, the very institution of the state, to not go against certain people, to not go on the path of imperialism, for example?
Okay, interesting question. Frida, maybe you can go first. Is it possible for a state not to be oppressive?
Well, from a Marxian point of view, no. The state is the manifestation under capitalism. The state is the manifestation of the interests of capital. And, capital, where does capital comes from? Capital comes from alienated labor, alienated mechanical labor that produces monetary value and therefore creates a society in which the goal of society becomes the production and accumulation of monetary value as an end in itself. And so the state becomes the protector of that. And I would argue also, and I've discussed this in my book, Socialist Shamanism: A New Approach, where I discussed Raya Donevskaya's critique of state capitalism in the former USSR and Maoist China, that the concentration and centralization of capital, which is the trend of capitalism, leads to the point where you can have state capitalism, and then you can have the state capitalisms competing with each other. So no, I don't think that it's possible for a state to not be oppressive. And capitalism itself promotes relations of oppression and domination. Capitalism builds also on pre-capitalist forms of domination, patriarchy, racism, ethnic discrimination, or any type of discrimination. So no, I don't think that's possible. But I do think that competition among different states is something that is a feature of capitalism, that even when all the capital is concentrated in the hands of the state, we see the competition between the states. For instance, right now, what we're seeing is the Russia and China and US setting their spheres of influence. We see an alliance between Putin and Trump, Putin, Russia, and Trump administration. They're basically determining their spheres of influence. U.S. strategic doctrine states that the Western Hemisphere belongs to the U.S., but the U.S. also has control over what is going on in the Middle East to a great extent. They are, at this point, they are setting their spheres of influence, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're just going to stay with the spheres of influence, that's just the preparation for the next war between them. And I do see the world headed in that direction with, another very possible world war between the main poles of capital, the two poles of capital. In this case, is now Russia and China together, and but the West is now the Western pole of capital is now partly in an alliance with Russia, even if it's a temporary alliance. And Trump administration is backing out of NATO and is even willing to give Europe to Russia, beginning with Ukraine and even the rest of Europe. So it's we're going through some really massive changes in the world right now. But one thing we really need to hold on to is that we are seeing a concentration and centralization of capital in the hands of the states. And even though for now there might be some type of agreement among Russia, China, and the US about their spheres of influence, that this competition is continuing and it's headed in a horrible direction, continuation of wars and militarism and total destruction. And with a very clear fascist, authoritarian and fascist content, especially as you've seen in the US in the first year of the second Trump administration, that we're seeing outright fascism, both in the form of internal so-called wars of purification against immigrants, and of course war on women, and external imperialist expansion, both going hand in hand.
Thank you, Frieda. Nasrin, you want to add anything?
Yes. It depends on what kind of state we have. And the thing is, okay, we accept that there is no state that is run by people. But perhaps people in Iran want to have the limited rights that, for example, people in Sweden have. Women in Iran don't want to be told what to wear, what to say, where to go. You have to marry. So, or workers in factories, students in universities, they want to have the right to have organization, trade unions. In a fascistic states like Islamic regime, you don't have the basic rights that people have in some Western countries. The right to life. I mean, when they don't provide work for you in Iran, they don't give you a penny to live on. What kind of life is that? I mean, okay, that's normal that people stand up and for their rights, and the regime suppress them. But our problem of countries like Iran is that other countries Western governments don't want people in countries like Iran have the basic rights. They want to run these countries with their regime change. And people invest, they close their eyes to this because they benefit as well. It's not only that Trump take the oil of Venezuela or have a plan for the oil in Iran. When they take the money to their countries, of course, the people in Western countries benefit of those stolen money. I mean, it's a very, I don't know, it's a cycle, but at least people invest can say to their governments, hands off other countries. I don't know if I answered your question.
And I also wanted to add to Nasrin, and thank you, Nasrin, because when I said that from a Marxian standpoint, the state cannot be anything but oppressive, I didn't mean that we shouldn't try wherever we are to put pressure on our states to have reforms. to get some democratic rights, or in countries where we still have some democratic rights, to preserve them. No, that's very important, because how else are we going to find a way to develop emancipatory views if there's no freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly? Those are the most basic things. So yes, I mean, of course, either from a Marxian standpoint, the state is the embodiment of the interests of capital. But at the same time, wherever we find room, wherever we can fight back and get some more rights and reforms, we should. We should.
Thank you. I can see, Vivi from Indonesia. I already pointed out Çağatay Cengiz from Turkey. There are friends from other countries. Sultan Shaheen also from India. I would briefly want to know, like, how the left and generally people reacted to these protests in Iran. If anybody wants to, not just a question, just a sort of comment about your own country, that will be indeed be great. Before we move on, I would really like some intervention. So, anyone? Otherwise, I will ask Frieda and Nasrin to sum up. I will have 5 minutes each for them. I think Sushman is raising his hand. Sushman, you want to say something?
Yes,
Please,
yes,
over
yes,
to you.
yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, Farooq, that's one of the reasons we find it extremely pertinent, this webinar, the discussion amongst us, is because the large mainstream left in India is not opening its lips about what is happening in Iran, except raising voices, statements about the American attempt, or it's being portrayed by big sections of the left and also a lot of individual left, that this is an American attempt to force a regime change in Iran. I know, just as this is happening on the heels of what's happening in Venezuela, which we condemn, picking up Maduro and things of that sort. So it's been shown in this light that there's an attempt by the Trump and American imperialism to force a regime change in Iran, and which we must protest. And Iran is an anti-imperialist bastion. I think this is a consistent argument that we have been doing for many years, and especially the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, that anti-imperialism doesn't mean that they are pro-people in their own countries. I mean, that's a basic thing, that what we argue for. That anybody can be anti-imperialist, but that doesn't mean they are pro-people. That's something that I argued on the question of Syria also earlier, or that holds true. Notwithstanding the fact that we condemned absolutely condemn what the picking up of Nicolas Maduro and things of that sort, but that's a separate discussion. The dictators, so it's this kind of a situation overall on the left. As far as our country is concerned, it's very strange that the current regime, which is one of the biggest flag bearers of Islamophobia, not only in India but globally, they try to do so. They've been very silent about it, and they have not raised their voices because they do have preferential trade, buying Iranian oil and things of that sort. So they prefer to put both their feet in two different boats, as we say in our language. So that's the situation in India.
Okay. Kasser is raising hand. Before Kasser, I want to know if anyone else want to speak, because Kasser had spoken once before I go again to Kasser. Anyone who wants to speak? Otherwise, this will be a last intervention by Kasser, a question or comment, whatever he wants. Then I will ask Nasrin and Frieda to sum up in 5 minutes. Especially when you're summing up, we would like to know, what do you think would be the course of events, sort of perspective, your perspective on the situation in Iran. Do you think that the protests will continue despite the repression, or the government will be able to suppress them for a longer time? What kind of perspective do you think is there? more importantly, what outside of Iran we can do to express our solidarity, if you can answer these two questions. So before that, I will, okay, Sabah is also raising hand. Sabah Gul Khatak, first you and then Kesser.
Thank you, Farooq. I just wanted to say, you'd asked about the perspectives, and I thought I'd comment on Pakistani women's movement and what have we done in solidarity. The last time that there was the movement in Iran from women, there was still some awareness and support in WAF groups and Aurat March. But this time around, because everything is overwhelming, even within our own country in Pakistan, we've had various, issues with our field marshal becoming more and more oppressive in our own country. Yesterday, we know that two human rights lawyers were dragged out and put behind, taken in by the authorities. We have high-handedness in our two provinces. So there's a lot to protest. There's the usual violence against women that takes place, Venezuela, what is happening in general on issues of migration, of people being pushed back. Everything has changed. So Iran, unfortunately, has not been anywhere on our radar, which is also concerning because it's a neighboring country, but because there are hardly any cross-border connections between civil society groups or women's rights groups, there is no sense of solidarity that has reduced a lot globally. But with Iran and Pakistan, I find that there's a huge vacuum. So I just thought I'll explain that even women's rights groups have been silent, not because they don't want to express solidarity, but because everything has become so overwhelming within our own country that it becomes hard to keep on responding to everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabah Saiba. Kesser, over to you.
Thank you for again giving me time to speak. Like I wanted to again talk about the geopolitical implications which Pakistani left has been saying in this scenario, and also when there was a war broke out between Pakistan and India, and they also peddled that same narrative. So it is also my curiosity because I don't have any answer to it. So I want you to give few minutes to this discussion as well. That what if like the Iranian regime falls? And there is no support for Hamas, Hezbollah, and that is what, of course, the West want to, go down, and also the Iranian people itself, they don't want the, support the Hamas and Hezbollah for the fighting. So how do you see this in the Middle East happening? Of course, we all want to, that fall down, but this is also what imperialist world want. It will make imperialist world more powerful if there is no country to support any resistance against their policemen in the Middle East. So how do you see this? So this is, I think, I want to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, so another angle perhaps you can add to your final sum up. We have almost 8 minutes left, so I'll really request both of you to take 3 to 4 minutes to sum up. Not a great time to sum up, but hope you manage. So Nasrin, maybe you can go first, and then Frieda can sum it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I answer to your last audience, I'll go with the current situation. I can say people have been pushed back, and there is a collective mourning in the country and among Iranian outside as well. For how long, I don't know. But I remember it was after the heavy suppression of women like Frieda, I was talking to a young friend in Iran, and I asked him what will happen next. And he said, there will be another uprising and another until people get rid of the regime. Now I can say the same thing, that people are resting to gather their strengths for the next uprising. Of course, if the West doesn't interfere. So if people don't want Iran to become like Afghanistan, Syria, or other countries with Western governments putting another criminal in power, they have to get rid of the regime with an uprising. But something that is, perhaps you heard it, and it's very interesting. The regime claims that people have burned many mosques. The truth is that, yeah, people burned, but the Islamic Guards had burned the mosque as well. Why? Because the guards held arrested protesters inside the mosque so that they could later be transported to prison. People tried to break into the mosques in order to release them. The Islamic Guards set fire to the mosque and burned alive the arrested protesters trapped inside. However, people also have burned mosques. But we need to look at the burning mosque in its context, that in Iran, religion has been a tool of control. Since the regime took power, the Basij and other organized state forces have used mosques as operational bases. Mosques were used to spy on people living in the local area. So in today's Iran, the mosques are part of the machinery of repression. Those who are still religious want religion separated from politics. Only those who are on the payroll of the regime do not see state religion as a source of oppression. And I must say, the regime is a master of manipulation. In 1978, before they took power, Islamists set cinemas on fire and blamed the Shah for provoking people. In Abadan, they burned more than 400 people alive in Rex cinema and said the Shah did this. The rumor that the Shah was behind the burnings caused people to join the uprising against the Shah. So we need to wait and see solid evidence of who burned these buildings. But right now, I'm worried about prisoners, those who were arrested recently and those who have been in prison for many years, some for more than 10 or 20 years. I'm worried they will be tortured again or executed. I'm worried about hundreds of 10 to 12-year-old children in prison who were arrested during last 3 weeks. But it's up to the universal reaction to this savage oppression to determine how many people will kiss the news or come out to die soon for being poisoned or being hit in their head, that then causes their death outside of prison, then it being called a natural death. I hope the international community doesn't forget these brave people who stood up for their basic rights, food and bread. Thank you.
Thank you. Frieda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nasrin. I agree. And I wanted to respond to the last two questions and make a couple more comments. So a question about from Qaisar Javed, when he says, what if the Iranian regime falls and there's no support for Hamas and Hezbollah, it will make the Western imperialism more powerful. Well, I think that if you look at it a different way, you'll see that what Iranian regime support for Hamas and Hezbollah has meant is that it's actually done damage to the region. I'm not saying Western imperialism is good, but why are we looking at this as a binary? Hamas is a religious fundamentalist, misogynist, authoritarian organization that kills Palestinians who are dissidents, who are progressives. Hezbollah, same way. Look at all the damage that Hezbollah has done in Lebanon and the region. So I think the idea that the Islamic Republic is helping the resistance is not right. This is not progressive resistance. This is even if you call it a resistance, it's a reactionary resistance. So I think we need to change the way we even discuss this issue. The question is not what if Hamas and Hezbollah fall. The question is, what about the Palestinian people themselves? Who cares about them? And what about their human rights and their women's rights? And the idea of a decent society for Palestine, and also the idea of some type of coexistence between Palestinians and Israeli Jews, either one binational state or two states in confederation with each other, but secular and democratic. That is what we need to talk about when it comes to the Palestinians. And I also really appreciate the question from Dr. Sabagol. And hello, Dr. Sabagol. So nice to hear your voice. And you're right that we are really the connections between women in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iranian women, they've just faded. And we really need to develop those connections. So when it comes to solidarity, yes, of course, we need to talk about the recent uprising and talk about the progressive voices and say that the protests should not be dismissed, and try to publish, articles from progressives in our journals or websites wherever we have access to them. But I think that fundamentally we need some type of dialogue among feminists in the region, and those feminists who are also opposed to capitalism and don't have illusions about capitalism, about what we can do, what type of vision we have about the future that can attract people, that can get to the roots of the problems, and not just stay at the surface level. That is, I think, what we need. And I've really done my best in the book that I published, Socialist Feminism, A New Approach. I've really done my best to bring up the issues and the questions that we need to be discussing, to talk about both why we're oppressed as women, and also what type of socialist, humanist, and feminist alternative we can offer, both economically and philosophically, overcoming relations of domination. And I would love some dialogue on that. And I think that is the way for us to go forward, to talk about the vision of a humanist, environmentally sustainable future for the region, for the world. I don't think we're going to move forward without that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frieda, Afary. Thank you very much, Nasrin, Parvaz. Thank you, everybody who joined us. It was indeed, I think, useful interventions by two of our Iranian comrades, and I make sure that this will not prove the last dialogue between us. And even if it was a small initiative, we will keep trying such actions, because in my view, every action matters. And hopefully in future, we will be able to do a bigger event. We badly need a cooperation at the regional level, especially, the feminist and socialist struggles in Afghanistan, Pakistan, India and Pakistan. They really need to come together. Let me thank you all yet again, and let me wish you all a very happy evening or morning in the case of Frieda. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
Farouk.
very much.
Thank you, Farouk, for organizing this. And thank you, Nasrin. and everyone else who was involved in organizing this. I truly, truly appreciate this conversation, and we need to follow through. So everyone, feel free to also contact me. Farouk has my email address, and also you can just go to my either socialistfeminism.org or Iranian Progressives in Translation and contact me. I would love to be in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all, and
Thank
thank
you
you
very
to
much.
organizers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thomas, I will reach on WhatsApp.
Yes, I am reachable. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye for now.